Hey guys, Leah and Michelle, Resistance Chicks. It is Wednesday, April 12th, 2017.
Okay, so what's going on right now? One of the most confusing times, but actually I'm really excited about it because you're involved and I'm involved and we are actually making a difference for the first time, and you're involved.
Dang.
Everybody's involved. We're actually making a difference. We're actually part of our government. Trump came out strongly saying we're not going to do regime change in Syria. He says we're not going into Syria now. Alex Jones says he has reports of like 150,000 troops headed in there. You've got a weird thing going on right now with Russia and North Korea. We're keeping our eye on that. I don't really know what to tell you. I know Kim Jong-chung, crazy guy. He's got something up his sleeve tomorrow for some birthday party going on. So
we don't really want to bring you guys things unless we're certain of them. So right now we're telling you we are aware of it. We're kind of in the wait and see camp. We're going to wait until we have a little bit more information before we give you an official.
But what I wanted to give you here right now is there's a really cool YouTuber guy. His name is High Impact Flicks, and a friend of mine shared with us this video in which he shows how the petrodollar is basically tied to a lot of our wars, and tied to Syria right now. And so I wanted him to like take the show, and then I wanted to explain it a little bit more, because if you don't understand that we went into Iraq not for weapons of mass destruction.
Does anybody even believe that anymore?
Then there's a lot of learning and education. And I suggest that you just, instead of watching a movie at night, you Google a lot of these documentaries, and Google some documentaries on the fiat banking system and the petrodollar and Saudi Arabia, because there's a lot of really crazy links here, and they fit perfectly like a key into a lock. And since this guy did the work, I want to play his video. He takes like 10 hours worth of documentaries into 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's like a primer on this whole thing, and everybody should just at least get this. And then we can, once you have this as your basis, then we can help you to branch off, and we can go deeper into the other areas.
Let's do it.
If you want to support the channel with $1 or $2 a month,
he's got a Patreon account. I do want to give him some props because he did this.
For 1 second that we lobbed $100 million worth of ammunition into Syria because we have a benevolent government who loves and cares about dead or suffering children in foreign lands, then you weren't listening to or haven't heard then Secretary of State Madeleine Albright as she told the public that U.S. foreign intervention, which directly cost the lives of over 500,000 children, was worth it.
That's just, and several of you have sent that video
500,000 children
to us.
died.
Thank you for that.
I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it? I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
You're clueless.
I have to stop at a couple places. I think you're going to see a lot of stops. Okay, so that was just 500,000, 76,000, which is an extreme, a crazy number of children died. Over 1 million people died. And when you see that we went into Iraq for the petrodollar, you're going to look at your car differently. You're going to look at your house differently, especially in America. You're going to look at your cha-ching. A lot of these countries, they don't have the 0% credit cards that we have because we daggone messed up everything. Not we, like my Patriot Galley would say. She would say the fiat banking system. He's going to go into this, but I really want to lay the foundation, you guys, that millions of people have died because of our bankers.
And we are not, you and I, we are not innocent in this.
We have to speak out. We have to get up every day. We have to go to our jobs. We have to make the green back. I understand, right? But at the same time, if we turn our eyes to that, then we're complicit. We have to speak out. And that's what the majority of Trumpers are doing to Donald Trump, and saying, listen, I see what George Bush did. I was there. I backed him and support him. I feel the blood on my hands, which we should feel. Okay? Because we were lied to, but we should have been able to recognize a liar.
Right. So we shouldn't stop it too much. We'll try not to.
I just don't want to remember the 1993 attack by the federal government on the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, that resulted in the killing of 76 people, including children. But most of all, you're clueless about the history of this propped up mixture of cloth and paper in your pocket.
Bingo.
Called the Federal Reserve Note.
Federal
Why
Reserve
the hell is this thing worth anything?
Note.
First, you need to know that in reality, it's not just a Federal Reserve Note. It's not just a dollar. It's a petrodollar. So here's a short history lesson you really need to know. In 1944, a war-weary world convened in the Bretton Woods Conference. 44 allied nations from across the globe met to discuss the future of the new economic world. From this meeting came an arrangement to establish the US dollar, which was then the strongest currency, as the global currency.
You're gonna pause it! I knew you were gonna pause it!
You guys have to understand that a bunch of countries, got together and decided, you know what? We're going to make the United States dollar the ultimate economic standard. You guys.
And guess what? What it was gonna do? It was backed by gold.
It was backed by gold.
It was backed by gold. And they were supposed to keep it flat. 35 USD. Okay? They were supposed to keep it they were supposed to keep it steady. They said, we got the gold, we're gonna keep it steady. But he's gonna show you how they messed that up.
Which would also be backed by gold. You can kind of think of it as an insurance policy for the financially ruined nations at the time. From the Bretton Woods Conference also came what would eventually evolve into the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Trade Organization.
Globalism?
All is right with the world for a few years, but then the 1960s hit. The U.S. gold-backed monetary system begins to cripple the American economy. The pegged fixed rate of dollar to gold first created a false demand for the US dollar, which eventually could no longer be backed in gold. Countries grew suspicious. Then we got involved in the Vietnam War. And our deficit was realized by the world in late 1971. That deficit being about $200 billion.
Hey,
countries began asking for their gold, but the US simply no longer had it. Well,
don't worry, guys. We're only going to print enough dollars for the gold that we have. And then they started to say, oh, can I have our gold? Oh, sorry, I don't have any gold. What do you mean you don't have any gold? We said we were going to have gold, and so we started printing money, and it's...
It was once a nation that held 80% of the world's gold, now had almost none. So the president at that time had to act, and act quickly. So the United States makes history again in 1971.
Faux shame!
On August 15th, 1971, the U.S. president at that time, Richard Nixon, delivers a speech to the world.
We must protect the position of the American dollar as a pillar of monetary stability around the world. In recent weeks, the speculators have been waging an all-out war on the American dollar. I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
So our dudes who we choose, they can still be backed by gold, but all y'all, your ship sunk.
There would no longer be a gold-backed U.S. currency. World currencies now floated on the market, ending the Bretton Woods Agreement. Henry Kissinger, Nixon's Secretary of State...
I'm so sorry. I know this is going to get long. But what you guys need to understand is, when you write a check, that check represents what's in your bank account. It's a promissory note, essentially. Dollars used to be, in effect, a promissory note. We trusted that when we took our gold and silver to the bank and they gave us a promissory note, that it meant we could always go and get...
Which is what they made people do.
We could always go and get our gold and our silver back at any time. So when the government unilaterally all of a sudden decides that the dollars are not going to be backed by gold and silver, they have literally just now stolen your money from you.
And your gold
and silver. They have stolen... well, that's what money is, gold and silver.
My grandma's generation...
Paper dollars are not money.
They all had to turn in their gold legally.
And that was an illegal, fraudulent confiscation of assets from the American people, and we bought it hook, line, and sinker.
State assists in the deal breaker. In 1973, to maintain a demand on a global scale for the US dollar, similar to that of the Woods Agreement, a deal is struck with Saudi Arabia. Oil for dollars became the new world economy.
Saudi Arabia is a key player right here, and we're going to go into that in a little bit.
The petrodollar system is born. The petrodollar deal between Saudi Arabia and the United States is this. It takes special note of this because it's the basis of today's American foreign policy in the Middle East. For every barrel of oil purchased from Saudi Arabia from any nation, the oil would have to be purchased in US dollars only. For those who have foreign currency, they would first have to convert to US dollars before being able to purchase the oil. Every growing economy operates on oil, so they needed US dollars. But the exchange for such a lucrative deal comes at a cost that we still pay for. For Saudi Arabia to agree to the exclusive oil for dollars deal, the US promised weapons and military protection. For excess profits made from oil, Saudi Arabia would buy US debt. And that's what you have in your pocket. That Federal Reserve note is a note of debt.
That's exactly what
This
it
is key. This is key to where everything went berserko.
Where we
Okay?
used to have a promissory note that represented our funds that are held, but now that note represents a promissory note that says, I owe Saudi Arabia.
They're buying our U.S. debt. Okay? They're not the only buyers of U.S. debt,
But they're a big one.
this is a huge deal struck with Saudi Arabia. So now we're in bed with Saudi Arabia,
And we're
we
funding
can
them.
no longer be America first, which is why you have 9/11.
So in short, the United States was to protect Saudi borders, which is oil, at all costs necessary. Now for some kickers. In 1975, OPEC arrives. Multiple nations agree on the oil for dollars deal with similar U.S. military and weapons protection exchanges. But some years after the arrangement, several nations begin to question the validity of such a deal, much like what happened with the gold for dollars deal of Bretton Woods. Nations like North Korea, Iran, Syria, and Venezuela decide to exit or not take part in the deal. This is also during a time when Russia, China, and India turned their backs on the petrodollar system. Iran's sanctions commenced in 1979. Remember Syria? They made it to a similar list in 1979 by that same U.S. department. Terms are coined like axis of evil, a corporate mainstream.
Remember, this axis of evil isn't based on radical Islamic terror. It's based on people who left our petrodollar system.
Media favorite. In 1980, the Rapid Deployment Joint Task Force, or RDJTF, is established, mainly to deter Russia and maintain Gulf region oil stability. In 1983, the RDJTF turns into the United States Central Command, or CENTCOM. Their responsibility, Middle East and Central Asian regions. Then comes Saddam Hussein, 9/11, and the War on Terror. In 1991, the U.S. air-ground war in Iraq begins, also known as the Gulf War. April 2000, the U.S. builds $1 billion base in Qatar. In the event
The U.S. builds $1 billion base in Qatar. I say Qatar, whatever.
of action against Iraq. But this barely rates a mention.
That what he said. Sorry, I stopped his mid sentence. He said an event to go into into Iraq.
Mainstream media. In September 24th, 2000, and this is important to note, guys, Saddam Hussein announces Iraq oil exports would be exchanged for the euro, not the U.S. dollar.
You can actually find this document, and I'm gonna just bring it up here. The Iraq nets handsome profit by dumping the dollar for a euro, and this article was written February 15th, 2003. Okay, and it says almost all of Iraq's oil exports under the United Nations Oil for Food program have been paid in euros since 2001. Around 26 billion euros has been paid for 3.3 billion barrels of oil in escrow account in New York. And I'm going to link to this, but that was so key, and it's so important to recognize that Saddam Hussein in Iraq went to euros, and then suddenly we are invading Iraq.
Petro-Euro plans are in place, and Hussein thumbs his nose at American Saudi oil deals. Now remember, that was almost exactly 1 year before the 9/11 attacks. In March of 2001,
he starts it almost 1 year before 9/11.
Right.
Remember, I'm just gonna give away the key punchline here. Where did 16 of the 19 2001 9/11 attackers come from? There's one country. It's called Saudi Arabia. They were backed and supported through Saudi Arabian government programs.
The Pentagon documents how Iraq oil fields would be carved.
Just FYI, to prove this fact, the House this year, 2016, overrode an Obama veto so that family victims can sue Saudi Arabia.
Up and outsourced to Western companies. Then comes September 2001, the 9/11 terrorist attack. Already, not everyone is convinced this is so straightforward, but the mainstream media churns into action, quickly pointing fingers at Afghanistan and Iraq. But most of the attackers were already known to be Saudi. Bush ignores Saudi ties to the attacks and instead hunts for reasons to invade Iraq and continually presses.
If he had anywhere to go,
It would be Saudi Arabia.
you would go and you blast the smithereens out of Saudi Arabia, but you can't do that because they buy our whole oil.
They own us, essentially.
Do you guys even see this? This is so huge. This is so huge. Saudi Arabia, it was well known that these attackers were from Saudi Arabia, that they were millions in these government Saudi programs. They were setting them up in apartments. They were giving them money. They were giving them intelligence.
This is the CIA for a link. Then they link Iraq's Hussein to bin Laden, but with no credible sources. Mainstream media perpetuates the Bush administration line that Hussein is guilty of the attacks by association. The U.S. must war with Iraq and Afghanistan. The war on terror commences in the name of freedom and democracy. And what you need to keep in mind is that oil buys America a lot of cheap deals. It props up the U.S. economy, and it's an excuse to print dollars to supply to those who want to buy oil. And what the United States government doesn't want citizens knowing is that in 2002, the petrodollar is dumped. Saddam Hussein's petro-euro is now in full swing. Almost. This essentially means that if Europe were to jump on board, the 1973 US-Saudi deal would be on shaky grounds. By March 2003, Bush announces war with Iraq after much media hype, and by June of 2003, Iraq's oil is suddenly trading under the petrodollar again. So what does this all mean? The rundown I just gave you is far from exhaustive and has taken weeks to compile. And it's the government's intention to make this complex. The words petrodollar system tends to make one's eyes glaze over, but if you're interested at all in the current international climate from Russia to Israel to China to Iran, Syria, the Middle East, or even North Korea, you need to inform yourself about the petrodollar. If the petrodollar failed tomorrow, the United States economy would most likely collapse, and hyperinflation would roll through this country like an unstoppable storm. Those who don't deal in US dollars have a good chance of economic survival, but superpowers would change and the world would be a different place. The United States would lose their global standing. It's the ultimate textbook fall of an empire.
Some hard-nosed people took over the direction of American policy, and they never bothered to inform the rest of us. I went downstairs, I was leaving the Pentagon, and an officer from the Joint Staff called me into his office and said, I want you to know, he said, sir, we're going to attack Iraq. He pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office that says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. I couldn't believe it would really be true, but that's actually what happened.
I got another video on that. 7 countries in 5 years, and we've done it.
These
Except for
people
Iran.
took control of the policy in the United States. We can use our military in the region, in the Middle East, and the Soviets won't stop us. He said, and we've got about 5 or 10 years to clean up those old Soviet client regimes. Syria, Iran, Iraq, before the next great superpower comes on to challenge us. The purpose of the military is to start wars and change governments. It's not to sort of deter conflict. we're going to invade countries, and you know, my mind was spinning. They wanted us to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, make it under our control. And that's why we're failing in Iraq, because Iran and Syria know about the plan.
So let me go back to what I said at the beginning of this video. If you think for 1 second that we lobbed $100 million worth of ammunition into Syria because we have a benevolent government who loves and cares about dead or suffering children in foreign lands, you need to take that dollar out of your pocket and realize that your entire way of life is about to change.
So
This video was made
I'm going to tell you that right now, if Patriot Gallery was here, we'd be here for another hour.
all right, so this is what I want you guys to take away from this, because it is so key and it's so important. Everybody keeps wondering, Trump, where did you go? Why did you do this? What could they possibly have to hold over Trump that would make him do something that would turn his back on everything that he campaigned on, that he's been saying for years?
I'm going to show you some videos in our next segment.
All right, the key is, listen to what he just said, and I'm going to tell you fact. He is 100% right. If the petrodollar falls tomorrow, we have economic collapse like you have never seen since the Great Depression, and
Let
probably
you know,
before.
we had an economic
Probably
collapse
never even
in
including
2000.
that, is what I mean.
The dot-com burst. I can tell you that my grandmama, she lost, well, she get down by 1/3.
You know what? Yeah, and we talk about that all the way, and I don't want to like discount that, okay? But what I'm talking about is hungry people. Type,
No. What I'm
type
saying is that
economic
if
collapse.
that had been allowed to continue, so then you had 9/11.
Exactly.
If we didn't wrap that up and go into Iraq and start, the Iraq war actually brought us up out of that slump.
Right, exactly. But this is key point right here, right now. If you're Trump and they're coming and they're telling you, if you do not do this, then we are going to have economic collapse and hungry American people. We're talking about house foreclosures. We're talking about electricity getting shut off. We're talking about grocery stores getting raided. We're talking about people can't buy gas. Worst thing, and you're the president. You've only been the president for 2 or 3 months. What do you do if they're coming at you and they're telling you this? Okay? I got to tell you, if you're Trump, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And if you believe them, which they're actually probably true, I'm not saying that I support what Trump did. If I was the president, I would let it collapse. This thing has to, I don't want hungry people, I don't want house foreclosures, but it has to collapse. It cannot continue like this anymore. They've been propping it up for way too long.
A million Americans dying and a million Iraqis dying?
And that's what we're coming to if we continue on this war with Syria. So I want to wrap this up because we're going to keep covering this in different segments. But like Leah said, you need to do your research. You have got to do the research.
So
on
we're going
this.
to delve deeply, guys, into a next segment into the petrodollar and then to the 7 countries in 5 years.
All right. So this is Leah Michelle signing off for Resistance Chicks, where it is not a conspiracy theory if it is the truth. Don't forget to like,
This
comment,
is the granddaddy, you
and
guys,
subscribe
of all
to
conspiracy
Mass Faith
theories
3
being
and
true.
Resistance Chicks. Ring the bell for notifications and find us on Facebook and Twitter. We love you. God loves you. God bless. And come back for our next segment.
I was cold.